Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to IRMS's public sector event for September. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Scott to take us through the next hour to talk about all sorts of different things around AI. And just a few housekeeping things. Please do feel free to use the chat, but please keep it obviously constructive as far as possible, please. And if you've got any questions, Scott, do you want people to put them in the chat, or would you prefer them in the questions?
Either or. I know some people can use the questions, they're fine. If people want to put them in the chat, that's fine. I've got it open so I can see.
Okay, super. So without more ado, I will hand over to Scott to take us through the next hour. So over to you, Scott.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you very much for inviting me back to talk on AI. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Scott Sammons. I'm talking on behalf of Act Now Training today. So of the various different hats that I wear, today is an Act Now hat. So we've done this session before. So those of you that are thinking, hang on a minute, you've talked about AI a couple of times here, Scott. Is this going to be a rehash of the 2 times before? You'll be pleased to know that it is not. We had a little chat, and actually we decided to build on what we've talked about before, look at some developments and some other bits and pieces, but it most certainly is not a rehash of the previous session. So, quick introduction before we get started. For those of you that don't know, Act Now is a training company. We've been around for 20 years, well over 20 years now. So played with data protection back when it was sexy, long before GDPR came along. And we've been doing training and consultancy for a little while. We do training, courses, qualifications in all aspects of information governance. And one of the things we do, or have been doing lately, is a AI course for DPOs, which has been quite successful. In fact, I recognize a couple of names, so a couple of you have on that course. So that's Act Now. Little introduction from me, and welcome to this session on Mr. Clippy's Guide to Understanding AI. And for those of you that have heard me talk about AI, you'll understand why I have a little bit of an obsession with Mr. Clippy, and why I like to boil AI-related problems down to a Mr. Clippy type level. And I was very happy this morning, because this morning I found a little image online where someone has taken a paperclip, put 2 little googly eyes on it, and it says, "Hi, I'm Clippy, your office assistant. I thought you should know that today is Tuesday." And I'm really tempted to go and do that myself. Get a little paperclip, put 2 little googly eyes on it, and bring Mr. Clippy back. If there's a campaign to reinstate Mr. Clippy, sign me up, because he was just annoyingly brilliant. Now, for those of you that are of an age to remember Mr. Clippy, you know what the hell I'm going on about. For those of you that don't, Mr. Clippy was a very handy little, what's the word I'm looking for? Office assistant that Microsoft brought out. You could have Mr. Clippy, you could have a little ball thing, you could have a puppy or a kitten, and it would do certain things to help you out. And we're going to be using Mr. Clippy to explain some of the developments in AI, some of the issues in AI, some of the approaches that you need to take with regards to managing AI. So just to finish off introduction, for those of you that don't know, my name's Scott Sammons. I'm a senior associate trainer with Act Now Training. I've been with them for the last 5 years. Before then, I was in-house at local government, and before that, health, banking, finance. I'm also freelance under my own banner, under Lighthouse IG. I'm also a skills coach for the Data Protection and Information Governance Apprenticeship Programme in England. England? Yeah, I think it's just England at the moment. I'm also a volunteer at the IRMS. So, Mr. Clippy is going to help us go through the basics of why AI presents some problems to you. They're not insurmountable, so this is not a AI is coming, we're all doomed, not by any stretch of the imagination. And if you have been on the Act Now course, you'll know that we don't say that. It's not about that. AI very much is here. However, some of the noise, some of the hype, some of the, oh my God, it's AI, we must do this, or any of that nonsense, it's nonsense. We've been here before. All of you that have been involved in a 365 project, a deployment of going digital, so a digitization project, when computers were first introduced, all these big, massive changes that we've gone through over the last 20, 30, 40 years, many of you would have been involved in a complex project like this before. So you're going to notice a lot of the problems with AI are very similar to the problems you faced before. Therefore, the way we approach them is very similar to how you've approached them before. So while, yes, AI does present some unique challenges, that is true, this, what's the word I'm looking for? Hyperbole? Is that a word? Yeah, we're going to use the word hyperbole around AI and around how it's going to bring us all down. It's the death of detection, blah, 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 blah. No, we can tackle this. We can get a grasp of it. We can manage it. We can engage in it. But we do need to acknowledge some problems and some issues that we need to resolve. So we're going to go through some of those. So we're going to go through the basics of AI. I can't give you an absolute chapter and verse, good understanding of how AI works in an hour. It's not going to happen. But what we are going to do is boil it down into its basic elements. So you understand fundamentally how AI, and I'm going to explain why I'm putting it in inverted commas in a moment, why AI, or sorry, how AI works and what some of the issues are. We're going to look at some key areas of risk. We're going to look at some key things and some key skills for you as either a records manager, DPO, whatever your role may well be. I'm going to be posing some questions at you. I'm going to get you doing stuff. This is very much an interactive hour session. So depending on where you are with your AI stuff, where you are with your AI projects, governance, etc., we'll give you as much as we can, and I'll signpost you to some things that are on the Act Now course. I will say whether or not it's a sales plug or not. So, first things first, if you came on this course to understand or to get more insight into Chat GPT, then I hate to break it to you, but no. AI is more than Chat GPT. And the amount of times that we get queries, or when I'm going to see clients, they go, we want an AI policy. And they specifically word it around Chat GPT. No, 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 and no. It's like writing a records management policy explicitly for Microsoft Word. What are you doing? Stop it. So a little soapbox moment of mine, a little bugbear of mine, is that everyone's become obsessed with Chat GPT, and rightly so. It has been a little bit of a phenomenon. It has pushed a few things further along than where they were, but don't fall into the trap of making your AI compliance program, framework program, whatever word you want to use, all about Chat GPT. Because there are lots of other products out there that all work in very different ways. Lots of them have similar issues, which we're going to go through today. But if you put all of your effort, all of your controls, all of your thoughts into one solution, then there are going to be other areas of the business that are going to use other bits of AI that you're then not aware of. You're going to have a policy that's so narrow that it then becomes unflexible with other things. And when you find actually that Chat GPT isn't this all singing, all dancing, amazing thing that can solve world hunger, and that actually you do need to look at other products, you then become stuck and you're constantly playing catch up. So one of the things I would implore you to do is, if your organization is framing its AI policy, framework, project, push forward, nonsense, whatever word you want to use, around ChatGPT, just take a moment. We actually need to look at AI as a whole. What is it we want AI to do? not do? What sort of things do we find we think are acceptable for our use of AI? What are things do we think actually, no, we will never use it for that? What sort of data we want to put in it, etc. All the issues we're going to talk about over the next 45 minutes, it should be technology neutral. I mean, I know we're talking about AI and it's a type of technology, but don't go for product specific. Make sure you're wording it so it's actually about AI. I'll explain why I'm doing that in a moment. End of soapbox moment. Keep seeing it time and time again. We had someone come on the AI course that went, "Oh, I thought this would be about chat GPT." No, just no. There is more to AI than just chat GPT, a hell of a lot more. So if you are framing it around that, no. Now, I said earlier on, for those of you that have just joined, I said earlier on that AI isn't new, and it's not. It's been around for a while. And a lot of what it's being used for at the moment isn't new. So the reason why I pick on Mr. Clippy is that Mr. Clippy was actually one of the very early examples of office-based assistants. So a very, very young Alexa or Siri or Cortana, I think it's the Microsoft 365 one, and it works in a very simple way. It was, if you're doing something, so to whom it may concern, it would then read that and go, "Oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like me to format that in the way of a letter?" And it would then change your Microsoft Word document. Or if you're doing something in Excel, it would recognize what you're doing and make recommendations. Or very, very simple. If this, so if I type in "to whom it may concern," then it would trigger a response. You then either said yes or no as to whether you wanted it to do what it was that it was suggesting it should do. Very early form of AI. Very, very early form. Quite simple, quite simplistic. Would scout, would spot, would respond. Trigger, response. Very, very simple. And that was in Windows, what? Microsoft Office Windows 98. So well over 20 years ago. So this AI revolution, more of an evolution than a revolution. For those of you that have been around for a while, do you remember getting involved in a project with the Dragon voice recorders, where secretaries, medical secretaries, legal secretaries, that sort of thing, moved from analog based, they would manually type out the voice recording, so it went to the recorder, they'd then listen to it and type it out. They moved away from that into this software that would analyze the recording and then type it out manually. So I'm doctor, I type into recorder my letter, it would then translate that letter in, or that recording, into a Word document. The secretary then just had to proofread it and make sure it was valid, check anything and move it through. That was a project I got involved in. Oh, when was this? 2010? It would have been 2009, 2010, around that time, when Dragon recorders became a big thing. They were a great way of saving money. Councils were using them to try and streamline some of their secretarial pools, all sorts of things. Very, very early form of machine learning. It was voice-based, what's known as voice recognition-based, but it would analyze what the doctor was saying or what the person had dictated into the recording, translate it into words. Nowadays, you've got a really advanced version of that on your phone that will do it. It'll also translate it. Very early version of that. Now think back, if you did get involved in those sorts of projects, what were the sorts of issues that came up? What were the sorts of issues you were dealing with? Quality, storage, where was the device going, encryption? If it was indeed being routed through some software, sometimes it was on-prem, sometimes it was off-prem. Where was that software? Were they control a processor? Were they making any decisions, or was it just literally just translating? Very same questions we asked today, the very same questions we asked today. So if you got involved in some of those projects way back when, you'll notice that some of these projects now, where people are using complex algorithms to analyze voice recordings, visual input, etc., a lot of the questions are very similar. A lot of the problems are very similar. and they are problems and issues you've tackled before. So you do have the skills and resources to tackle them now. And if you didn't get involved in that project, count your blessings, it was horrible. Image recognition has been around for a while. So if you've ever used a Google, for example, the ability to upload an image, it will tell you where it came from. That's been around for well over 10 years. Tried to find the exact date it was launched and I couldn't find it. There's a differing opinion of when it was actually launched, but it's well over 10 years old. So that's not new. Google predictive text. So when you type into Google and it says, you say, how old is, and it will then come up with a list of top rated suggestives. That's been around for well over 10 years. That's a form of machine learning analytics. It's taking what everyone's searching for and giving you the top, presenting to you the top things, what people are searching for and what you are interested in. If you don't have your trackers blocked, of course. Now, the key thing to all of this, and this is one of the key, what I would say is one of the key new things for us DPOs and information records managers to be aware of, is that the challenge is slightly different in that now it is very much about structured data. So where leading up until now, a lot of content, a lot of products, a lot of training has been around unstructured stuff. What's in your email systems, what's in your Word, network drives, blah, 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 blah. In order to get AI right, so in order to have these algorithms that work, in order to have these predictive analytics that work, that are reliable, that you can trust, then at its core, you are going to have a conversation about data. Structured data, data governance, and data management. You cannot do AI effectively, build complex, clever algorithms if you don't have good data, period. No matter what anyone else says about we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, rubbish. You're going to be tidying up things that you've got to have good quality stuff, which means if you're currently not doing data governance, data management, data quality in any form, you're just working with what you've got, managing what you've got. You've got some IRM controls, you've got some sort of data quality control, but not a lot. But a lot of what you've got is legacy, or it's being reused, or all these sorts of other things. Then, as I think it was Henry Ford said, or was credited in saying at least, rubbish in, rubbish out. It's exactly the same here. Rubbish data in, rubbish data out. I'm going to refer you to, in a moment, a couple of good books and a couple of good educational programs that talk exactly about this, that say a lot of these algorithms that have been developed have problems because the data that built on them was poor or had issues with it or had a bias to it. So one of the things we talk about on the thingy course, sales plug, is data bias, because bias is a good thing and a bad thing. It can be a bad thing, it can be limiting. That data wasn't designed for that, now you're using it for that. But it could be something that is something you need to be aware of with that data. Excuse me, sorry. No idea where that came from. So, do you remember the mutant algorithm? If you want to see it, thank you, everyone. For those of you that want to see a golden example of this, so the next time, thank you, Andrea. Next time someone says, oh, no, it's not about data, it's about the algorithm, refer them to this example. So do you remember when in the height of lockdown, everyone moved to algorithmic-based exams? So you didn't actually sit an exam. Instead, various different bits of data were put through an algorithm, and it was then you were going given a grade that it thought you were worthy of. At the time, the Prime Minister and the head of the DFE and others blamed the mutant algorithm. It's the algorithm's fault that it got it wrong. No. Two things. One, the data that was used to develop the algorithm was not good quality, in that too much weight or a prejudice was put on address. So your postcode, rather than it being a factor in whether or not you were academically well off or not, too much weight was put on it because data seemed to suggest that postcode has more of a factor in how you learn than is actually true. So the initial data that went in was wrong, which then meant the algorithm that was designed was wrong. Therefore, when all these students were put through the algorithm, it was off by quite some way. It was blamed on a mutant algorithm. Oh, there's something went wrong with the design. No, when you track it back to how it was designed, it was rubbish data in, rubbish data out. Basic principle of. You don't blame an engine for being badly designed. Oh, the engine fell apart. Well, you haven't built it properly. You haven't thought out what the engine needs to do. You've gone, oh, this needs to be a 6-cylinder V8 engine when it's pushing forward a lawnmower. No, you've overboiled it. Same sort of thing with this. So to come back to the comment just there from Andrea, you've got to look at the data. What data is being used to develop it? So from your AI governance program, how are you building these algorithms? Where are they coming from? Are they off the shelf or are you building them yourself? If you are building them, or if someone else is building them, because it's the same question, what data was used to build them? Where did you get that from? How do you know that? There's a really good book. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, nuts. What have I done with it? Is it over there then? Here it is. So there's various books out there. One of the ones I'm going to refer you to a little bit later on, including one around maths and equations. But if you want to see an example of how algorithms get built based on assumptions made in data sets, and how products are built made on assumptions made in data sets, and again, AI is built by us, so it's made on an assumption on data sets, then there's a really interesting book by a lady called Caroline Criado Perez called Invisible Women. It's all about gender bias in data sets. There's some fascinating case studies in here, some really good stuff in here. It brings with it a warning. She has in the past been criticized for some of her anti-trans views. So fair warning. But what's in here and some of the case studies she refers to around gender bias in data sets and how some data sets that we rely on to build products and services were actually collected from and analyzed on men. So trying to then use them for women sometimes is okay and there's no problem whatsoever. In other scenarios, actually results in completely the wrong product or the wrong service or the wrong initiative or the wrong position being taken to market. So data bias isn't inherently a bad thing. It is nonetheless something you're going to have to consider. Otherwise, as we saw at the beginning of this year, you get things like this. In Georgia, a man was arrested for a crime in a state he's never visited, never been to, because the Baton Rouge Police Department that had deployed facial recognition technology, the technology they were using couldn't tell one black person's face from another. Why? Because a lot of the people that they'd done the work on were white. Therefore, the system recognizes what it recognizes. I will, Fatima, yes. As a list, I'll also give you a link. So when we release the slide deck, I'll put a link in there as well. There's also a link to some of the other books in there as well. Do you remember when in cars, when they started deploying the little facial recognition or the voice recognition software, the amount of people that used to say, yes, there we go. They used to say that when their husband or when a man would say, hello, car, do this, it would respond. But when a woman did it, it always got it wrong. It would either take you the wrong way or it would give you the wrong address or it didn't recognize you at all. One of the colleagues I used to work with at Essex, her and her husband used to suffer with this all the time. It hadn't been trained on them. It was a car fresh out of the line, but it would recognize his voice, but not hers. Why is that? Well, because when it was being designed, the people designing the system were men. Therefore, what the system was trained on and what it learnt to remember was, yeah, Mark gave the example there of the episode of Miranda where she repeatedly says Tuesday and it doesn't pick it up. It's because while that system was given a wide range of voice recordings to work on, the majority of them were men. Therefore, it's far better at picking up a certain range of voice than another, purely because the data it was given, what it learned on, what it learned to recognize and is programmed to do, more favored men, or there are more men than women. Therefore, when you then go to use said system, it will quite happily navigate to wherever you want if a bloke says it, or someone with a deeper voice. But if a lady does it, it would go, sorry, you want to go where? Don't understand you. Didn't pick that up. Because it didn't pick it up. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Same sort of thing with facial recognition. What is it learnt on? What is it taught on? What has it been using? It's picked up certain things, can't pick up certain things. Rob says, try being Scottish. Yes, Alexa really struggles with accents. Bless her little cotton socks. Even to the point where the commissioner has even issued, was using things like biometric technology, voice, face recognition, analyzing your heartbeat, your facial recognition, all this sort of stuff, issued a warning to say, look, it's just too immature. The data that's been used to develop it, while the algorithm is quite clever, well done, haha, lovely, the data that's been used to develop it is immature. It's not fully thought out. In, where was it? Hungary? Yeah, I think it was in Hungary. The Hungarian authority fined a bank for using this technology because they would analyze your voice recording to work out whether or not you were angry. And if you were angry or in distress, they would then prioritize a callback. Now, we all know you can shout as loud as you want. And that doesn't mean that your issue is any more important than the next person's. So why is a raised voice a sign of necessity? Where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. So don't run away with AI. Take it back to its beginnings. Go back to the absolute basics. What do you actually want your AI program to be about? And what data are actually going to be using to develop it? If you're using a third party to develop it, what data did they use? Otherwise, this wonderful algorithm they've generated is going to lead you down the wrong path because it's been designed for A when you actually need it to do B. So they're very logical, simple questions, but they're questions you're going to have to ask, which means, once again, we are the party poopers because we're going to be asking questions that the business doesn't want to ask or are too complex for the business to get its head around, but then we've got to ask them. Now, I just want to touch on some new developments that have come up since the last time we run this session, because a lot's gone on. Even the course that we run, every time we run it, we make changes to it because there's just so much going on. So there are a few things to keep up with. First thing to be aware of, and this is the first free resource we recommend that you all have a look at, is the launch of the AI Standards Hub. This is something that's been launched by the government and the, I can't remember the name of the other organisation, the Terence Higgins. No, it's not Terence Higgins, is it? It's the other one. I'm having a moment. It's been a long day. It's only Tuesday. Launched by, there we go, the Alan Turing Institute, that's the one, as well as the BSI, the National Physical Laboratory, Her Majesty's Government or His Majesty's Government, various different places, and it's free. Put a link in the chat, totally free of charge. So sign up, get access to their newsletters. You can get access to templates, resources, further training courses, webinars, all sorts of different things. What they're trying to do is pull in from various different places, sources, initiatives, various things that are going on with AI and machine learning. So the full umbrella of artificial intelligence. So if you've not signed up to it yet, do so. Really, really useful resource. Lots of really good things in there. And it's been growing and evolving even in the, I think it's been going about 9 months now. Even in the 9 months to a year that it's been going, it's already expanded a lot. So do have a look in there, well worth signing up to. We've also seen some publicly accessible, or the launch of publicly accessible AI tools like chat GPT, the Google version, etc., which has thrown the AI discussion forward somewhat. Because 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't have been talking about this, or it might have been a thing in the distance, but not really. But thanks to the likes of chat GPT and others, we're now talking about it more and more and more, which is a good thing in my opinion, because data and our data quality should have been on the agenda years ago. So the fact we're talking about it now, good, marvelous. What we've also seen, I'm going to come to the AI for Dummies book. That's on my list. Very, very good. What we've also seen, and we even saw today, thank you, Paul, for sending a link, another link as well, is we're seeing a lot more data or intellectual property data or other data leaking into models. So where things like ChatGPT, the Microsoft News story today, various different models are pulling in data that it then becomes part of that program. So when you then ask for them to design I don't know, the code for a new database, well, it's pulled that code from somewhere. That code might be IBM's, or it might be this, or it might be that, or it might be the other. Emma says, I found it really interesting that there was a judgment that everything created by is not copyrightable because it's been made by a thing. And at the moment, things don't exist in law, which is particularly interesting when you come to medical liability as well. The original founder of DeepMind even went online and in an interview expressing concerns about the development of AI and where it's going, and that there's been no real governance on it. Governments seem behind on trying to talk about it. Organizations seem to be going crazy for, look, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. But as they said in Jurassic Park, just because you can do a thing doesn't necessarily mean that you should. We've also started seeing the US protests over the use of AI in the creative industries. So a lot of people have been using AI to write films and finish scripts and start generating some AI-based artwork and various other bits and pieces. So the various guilds in America have gone, nope, and have started to strike. The TUC in the UK have started to look into AI-based issues and how that's going to have an effect on the workforce and whether they need to start doing something in the UK. There's been calls by MPs for the UK to start looking at an AI-based law, just as the European Union is doing. And the European Union has now reached a point with its AI law that it's reached general consensus. They're just going through the last tripartite negotiations, and then it should become law. So then, hopefully, with any luck, the AI may well be the first big block of nations to have an AI-based or an AI piece of law. Fascinating. So in order to keep up with all of these developments, because there's stuff going on all the time, strongly recommend signing up to the AI Standards Hub. So if there's one thing you take away from today, other than Scott's obsessed with data, is sign up to the AI Standards Hub. Do it. The newsletter comes out, I think it's once a month or every other month. There's loads of stuff you can sign up to. I'm genuinely not getting a kickback from it. So this is purely my own recommendation and experience in using it myself. Really, really good. Sign up to it. It's amazing. Do it. I think you've got the message now. We've also started to see, in terms of other legal developments, quickly before we move on, we've also started to see changes to the Data Protection and Digital Information Bill that's looking to enable the use of personal data for AI-based development? I have some views on that. There are some things in there that are good. There are some things in there that are troubling. I'm sure we'll talk about that on a different session. The EU Act is almost approved, and there are some other global bits and pieces on the move. So America's been talking about it. Some other places have been talking about it, but there's nothing concrete yet. So that if the EU does put its act together and get this EU Act agreed, it will be one of the first. And I kind of like the EU one because it's risk-based. Rather than just banning it outright, it says, well, what's the risk? What's the impact to individuals? What's the impact to data or product or services? Risk rate it. And then the more riskier it is, the more the law would expect you to put certain controls in place. So it's quite, that's an oversimplification of what the law says, but that's basically how they've designed it. Makes sense. I like that. And that's how I think your AI governance framework internally should work. You should say to it, or say to your organization, what do we want to be in scope of this AI framework and what do we not? So do we want to include some really clever Excel spreadsheets, or do we just actually want to focus on machine learning and algorithms? What do we want to do? Because it's all stuff that can have an effect on your services and on individuals. So do you want to do that or do you not? Choice is yours. I know some people that do, I know some people that don't. Choice is yours. But either way, you're going to have a discussion as to what is AI for you, what's in the definition for you, and therefore what is not. So, I'm picking up some of the interesting conversation that's going on there around copyright. So what? AI is coming. It's here for many of us. So why is this a problem? Why do I, as a DPO, need to worry about it? Why do I, as a DPO, need to do some things about it? Well, predominantly because this isn't new, but it does present some interesting challenges for you. Now, I love this little meme because it's a golden example of AI is very complicated. It is, that is true. But it is, at its core, it is an algorithm. It's an equation. It's literally a if this, then that. If that, then this. So one of the things you need to get your head round as a DPO, as an information records manager, whatever, going into the world of AI and machine learning, is you need to understand algorithms. Mathematics. If this, do that. If that, do this. Or if none of that, don't do any of that. So what I recommend you do, and this is something we cover off in the course, is base your learning and your understanding on machine learning. Because everything kind of revolves around how machine learning is built, deployed, and managed. So even the complex AI systems and all that sort of stuff, all of it has a foundation in machine learning and algorithms, your predictive analytics stuff, facial recognition, all of it revolves around this. So if you can get your head around machine learning, you can get your head around other things as well. So, two things for you to be aware of, and this is something that the AI for Dummies book talks about, and other things to be aware of, is that there are two types of machine learning. The first one is what's known as supervised learning. And this is where we label data. We say that is a yellow brick. So if we think of it in terms of Lego, that's a yellow brick, that's a red brick, that's a blue brick, that's a black brick, that's a green brick, that's whatever. We tell it certain things. It will then go and find them and then tell you certain insights as to how many there are. So for example, I could take that algorithm, put it on that big box of Lego down there. There isn't, by the way, but just imagine there is. And it will then tell me there are 1,000 yellow bricks, 2,000 blue bricks, blah, blah, blah. Supervised learning. It learns from what it sees. So it then recognizes yellow bricks in any format. And it then gives you insights. It then gives you insights. Star Trek hasn't worked its way into this, Georgina, yet, but it might do. That might do. It gives you insights, but it's structured. We can control it. So we control the labels. We often put it on data that we know about. So your network or that box of Lego. Supervised learning is quite controlled, which means we can tweak it, we can change it, we can fiddle with it quite nicely. Unsupervised learning, however, is a little bit different because it's unlabeled data. So for example, we could train it to recognize Lego, and that's it. And we then say to it, right, go off and find me in this big box, Lego. It will then learn for itself that there are different types of Lego, there are different colors, there are different shapes, there are different sizes because of what it sees. We haven't told it that, we've just given it some basic parameters for it to work on. It's then gone off and done this, or this, presented back with this. It's learnt what a yellow Lego brick is. Do you know what? Using Lego is a bad idea because it always gets you tongue-tied, but never mind. If it does that once, so it does it once, learns about it, presents you with some insights, and that's it. It doesn't then learn it or retain that. So if you then run it again, it has to relearn what a yellow brick is. That's just unsupervised learning. If it actually remembers what a yellow brick is and where it sees yellow bricks in various different forms and various different things, it then learns from it and remembers it. That's what's known as reinforced learning, where that algorithm will change based on what it sees, what it's exposed to. So it could see a yellow brick in these sorts of things, but now it sees it in an Optimus Prime, and now it knows it will also find a yellow brick in an Optimus Prime. And yes, I just happen to be building an Optimus Prime. Michelle says, what happens when AI becomes sentient? Well, this is why, Michelle, on this call, we say hello to our new robot overlords. Because they're probably listening in. And we're pretty much all doomed. You've seen the Terminator movies, right? We're doomed. Absolutely doomed. There's no two ways about it. So if global warming doesn't get us, that probably will. Well, that's proper doom and gloom for a Tuesday, isn't it? Okay. I won't take over. It will be lovely, and we'll live in a harmonious world of artificial intelligence. And no, I saw Megan recently. I can't say that either. Who knows? Who knows? AI film in 2001 was rather forming. It was heartwarming, wasn't it? Hardit says it's based on us, so it'll be flawed. Yes. Star Trek reference. If you've seen the film Star Trek First Contact, and I use this quote in the full day course, the Borg Queen, the Borg, a race of cybernetic organisms, says to Data, an android, you are an imperfect being created by an imperfect being. Finding your weakness is only a matter of time. Ha 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 ha. So the reason why I'm describing supervised and unsupervised is supervised learning, very tightly controlled, but it's an algorithm. So you can change the settings, you can see where it came from, you can charge questions based on how that was structured. So if it's been developed in-house or whether it's done by a third party, what were the data sets used to build this algorithm? Where did the data come from? What labels are in place? What values are on those labels? So if, for example, we're using a structured supervised learning algorithm for our education predictions, how does the algorithm work? Can we fiddle with some of the values so we could turn down the value on things like address, but turn up teacher recommendation, all that sort of stuff. Legitimate questions about how the algorithm is structured and controlled. And the more control you have as a legal entity, so you as a council, an NHS trust, a university, whatever you are, the more legally, especially from a data protection point of view, you retain controllership of that any personal data being put through that algorithm. Whereas if you know that they're using this sort of algorithm and you, the data controller that's wanting to use this algorithm for this data, have no control over that whatsoever, So it decides, or they, the third party, decides what data is going in it, what it's going to be used for, its value, where it might, what the outputs might be. Then you're handing over controllership, and you therefore may well become either a joint or a separate data controller, depending on what it is it's doing and how it's working. So you'll want to ask questions around how the algorithm was developed. Was it something that was done via supervised learning? Therefore, you can control it and challenge it. Was it unsupervised? In which case, is it something that learns and evolves over time, etc.? If you want to see an example of this, and we explore this a little bit more in the course, we won't have time today, but something we explore in the course is take something simple. How would you get Mr Clippy to recognize a letter? So it's got to look at certain fields. So it's got to look at the format of the document, the layout, the content. So just think in terms of really simple terms, simple things for a system to recognize. How would you recognize a letter? What would you need your algorithm to look for and distinguish from? And you'll actually find it's quite difficult to do. It's not as simple as you think, especially when you compare it to, well, how would you also then get it to recognize a CV? Because there are some things in a CV that are not in a letter and vice versa, but there are lots of things that are. So they could both be in Word, they could both be in PDF, they could both have an address at the top. They could both say or contain job titles, experience, qualifications. One might have the word or the phrase to whom it may concern him, while the other one won't. All these sorts of things, they're all individual points that determine whether or not something is a CV or a letter. And they're all individual points that the algorithm, Mr. Clippy, has to look for in order to then spot whether it's a letter or a CV. Because if you're writing a CV and it says, you're writing a letter, would you like me to do something about that? It's wrong and incredibly annoying. So one of the exercises we do on the course is to actually think about some of that. To actually say, well, if you're going to design an algorithm to recognize a CV and recognize a letter, what's it going to look at? What's going to be in there? How's it going to work? Because it then gets you used to looking at algorithms, looking at how they work, what they're looking for, how they need to be educated, how they need to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Based on knowledge in order to work. Because if you've got no idea what a CV is, you've never designed one before, but you've just Googled something and it's given you a list of criteria, that's never going to do the job. So some of the early questions is to ask, how is this algorithm actually working? What is it looking for? What are the individual fields? Now you're going to brush up against commercial confidentiality here, especially with a third party, because you're getting into the inner workings of their algorithm. So they might fight you on it. But nonetheless, dig in. There are things they can tell you about how the algorithm is working and how you can control some of that won't undermine their commercial confidentiality. So they will try and say, well, that's commercially sensitive. I'm not telling you. Not all of it is. They can still give you a good overview, enough for you to retain data controllership without going into the inner workings of it all. So do dig in on that point. Unsupervised learning, however, is a little bit more challenging, because yes, there will be some labels and things that we can control and some things we can see. However, there will be lots of things that we have little control over because it's learning itself. It's adjusting itself. Therefore, can we change the adjustments? Is there a record of the adjustments? If, for example, I've used an unsupervised learning-based algorithm to make a decision on person number 1 today, it's then made several other decisions on several other people over the last 7 days, and on day 10 it then makes another decision on person number 2. It's not the same algorithm. So if I then want to appeal the decision or review the decision, and I want to look back on the decision it made 10 days ago, does the algorithm keep a record of what exactly it was on that day? or does it overwrite as it learns? Because what the algorithm was 10 days ago isn't necessarily what it was today. So you've got version controlling issues. You've got, well, where is it pulling this data from? One of the news stories we saw today was that one of these algorithms from Microsoft has been pulling in data from places like your 365 account, email, messaging. Why is it pulling that in? How has it learned to do that? So if you think about something simple like recognizing a CV, if it's structured, we control it and we can then change the algorithm to say, no, that's a false positive, it's a letter, not a CV, and the algorithm will grow and evolve based on how we control it. If it's doing it itself, then it is doing that itself. It's changing the weight and the value and the algorithm based on what it sees. And the more data it's exposed to, the more it learns, the more it grows, the more it evolves, the more it builds into a CV of the 10,000 CVs I've seen, these are all the common denominators, and these are the rare denominators. So if they have all of these things in it, I'll classify it as a CV. If it has these things in it, I probably won't. Does that make sense? That is a very oversimplified definition of how machine learning and supervised and unsupervised learning works, but that's basically how it works. Now, if you then take that knowledge and apply it to your current understanding of information and records management, data protection, straight away, some issues start to pop up. So, for example, how was the algorithm developed? If we've built this algorithm, or if this algorithm has learnt how to do educational predicting, well, what data did it learn from? How does it know that someone in CM2 9LQ will get an A, whereas someone in CM3 4BY will get a D? How does it know that? Where did you get that from? If we're going to be using that to make decisions on people, to fuel the economy, to make strategic decisions on whatever, where did you get that from? How do you know that is true and accurate and reliable? Otherwise, some of these people that are floating around algorithms for business analysis prediction or education or various other bits and pieces, where did you get that from? How is this algorithm been built? Why are we using it, or why are we using it for this particular purpose? What was the quality of the data, the original data sets, whether that's internal or external? Because again, if you've got a load of data that was collected 20 odd years ago, and you now want to use that data on cars from 20 years ago, you will now want to use it today. Well, cars from 20 years ago, very different today. Oh, great minds, Emma. We're on the same level of madness. They're not the same thing. So yes, it's data about cars. Woohoo, well done. But it's not relevant to today. So just because you've got data about patients, about cars, about medical equipment, about airplanes, about whatever, blood pressure, whatever, what was the quality like? When was it taken? Is it relevant? Because if you've just gone, oh, that's data about blood pressure, I can use that in a blood pressure study. No. Basic data governance controls. So even setting aside the AI bit for a moment, if we wanted to use data for research study, we would ask questions about the data. Exactly the same thing here. Ask questions about the data. What conditions come with it? And are those conditions deal breakers, or are they things that you just need to factor into what you're doing so you know there are some limitations with what the algorithm can and cannot do? What is the algorithm doing? How are you going to maintain this? So you've built this lovely algorithm, you've resolved all these issues, you've used good quality data. How are you going to keep it that way? Because algorithms, like systems, so this is exactly the same question we have about systems right now today. How are you going to keep it that way? How are you going to make sure there isn't scope creep? How are you going to version control? All these sorts of questions that we have about systems, we also have about AI. It's exactly the same questions. Who owns it? So if it has been designed by you, who owns the copyright? If it's been done by a third party, who owns the copyright? Is it you? Is it them? The more you dig, the more you're going to have copyright issues or commercial confidentiality issues, but you need to dig. You need to find out these things, etc. In the development of the algorithm, what data was used? Who owns the algorithm? Is it you? Is it someone else? And how is it going to be maintained? Remember, with algorithms, and this is probably one way to keep it fresh in your mind, is rubbish in, rubbish out. So we need to make sure, either in its development or its deployment, that it's been built on good quality stuff and the algorithm is based on sound knowledge and research. Otherwise, rubbish in, rubbish out. In terms of its deployment, one of the common issues that comes up, especially if you're using personal data, is if you're going to use AI or machine learning or predictive analytics on an individual and therefore use their personal data, what's your lawful basis? In the UK, a lot of our laws are written for people. One of the issues that came up in the chat just now was around a lot of UK laws are written for people, officers, either officers of the law, office employees, whatever. It's based on a person with a power to do something or a power to not do something, whatever it might be. The law is written with people in mind. It's not written with algorithms in mind. So it could be that, yes, your member of staff has the power to do that, and they can do that in an analog way. Yes. Can they do it using AI? No, because the law doesn't allow them to do that, because it's not been written in that way. So we will need to, just as we do right now, read the law. What does it actually say? Is it a generic power based on the entity? Therefore, you've got some little bit of wriggle room, or is it a power granted to an individual? In which case, no, the machine can't do that because the power, the decision is actually granted to the officer, the social worker, whoever it might be. So no, you can't. So lawful basis is going to be a challenge. Explainability is going to be a challenge. Transparency is going to be a challenge. Angelina says, does AI product data outputs fall within the automatic processing laws? Depends. Some do, it depends on what it's doing and how it's doing it. So yes, 9 times out of 10, yes, but not always. So I wouldn't take that as a golden absolute, but yes, that's one of the issues we go through on the course, but yes. Can it be explained? So it's explainability, it's interoperability. Can you explain that to individuals? And especially from a data protection point of view, whose decision is it? Because if you are outsourcing this to a third party and they are indeed the ones building, controlling, managing, running the decision, you're not. You've handed over controllership to them. Do you want to do that? Probably not. So Mr. Clippy's quick step guide, some things for you to go away and think about, and some things that we recommend you do first is, first of all, scope the problem. For your organization, what is the AI problem? Because there'll be some organizations where there's loads of departments that could use this, and it's quite a big thing you need to get your head around. There are other places where actually it only can really apply in certain areas. So actually, yeah, it's a bit of a problem, but it's not wide-ranging like a digitization project would be. So actually, we can be a little bit more sensible with it. So for you, scope the problem. What sort of departments are interested in it? What sort of already started playing with it? What's going on? Start having that discussion now. Get people round the table now. How do we want to define AI? So what's in scope of your governance framework and what is not? And what are the sort of things where we could legitimately explore its use and all the issues that come with it? And other places where, do you know what, for us, that's out of scope. That use of AI for that particular reason is just not something we're going to look at, either because we don't have the technical capability, we don't have the data for it, or it just ethically doesn't feel like the right thing to do. But either way, start those discussions now. Get ahead of the curve. Don't get after the door horses bolted. Start those discussions now, proactively. What do we want to do about this? Get access to training and guidance. The AI Standards Hub will help you. There are also lots of other training courses out there as well, including our one, Salesforce. But fundamentally, get the right people around the table, get them talking. All the people that are banging on about AI in your organization right now, get them in a workshop, get them talking about it. Let's all agree what is AI and what is not. Let's agree what we want to do about it and what we don't. Let's get people buying into stuff now rather than later. So rather than go to them with a IG has a policy on that, actually get them inputting into it. Let's build something that we can all use rather than here's a policy and that's it. I also recommend get some skills for yourself. So buy the Data Governance for Dummies book. That's very good. The Artificial Intelligence for Dummies book. That's also very good. The Machine Learning for Absolute Beginners book. That's very good. The Ethical Data and Information Management book. That's also very good. And I believe they've just launched another one as well. And there's another book called Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. It's very much about algorithms, but nonetheless, very, very good book for understanding the power of algorithms and how you've got to ask the right questions to get at how they work. Because that's fundamentally, again, what AI is built on, algorithms. So do some personal reading for yourself. Those are just 5 books that I've read and I would highly recommend. They're very, very insightful, very, very useful. And links will be contained within the PDF, so you can go and find them from wherever you buy your books from. Have a look at the online courses. But fundamentally, you're going to have to start developing skills in data management and data governance, period. So if your skills are very much more of the traditional unstructured data, working with Excel, Outlook, blah, 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 you're going to have to change some of that because we're going to have to start looking at data governance now. So have a look at our course on the Act Now website, the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning course. It's a 1-day course that goes into this in more detail because we've kind of whistle-stop-toured through things. So it goes into this in more detail and gives you things that you need to consider, some tools, tips, best practice, and some other bits and pieces for you as well. There's also some, like the critical reasoning for beginners. I like that, Peter. I follow that one. It's very good as well. And we also give you some other bits and pieces like podcasts, some other things to listen to as well. So we've just given you a snippet of today so you can get the juices going. But that's pretty much a little update on where we are with AI at the moment, what's going on, and some of the little Mr Clippy's top 10 or top 3 things for you to go away and do to make sure that you've got a grip on what's going on with AI. But don't buy into the chat GPT hype because it's not worth it.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. It is now just gone 2 o'clock, and I expect other people are dropping off to go to other meetings. So I'm sure if you've got any questions, Scott will be happy to take those directly via email. Would that be correct, Scott?
Yeah.
So it just leaves me to say huge thank you, Scott. That was a brilliant and very interesting session, and we do appreciate you spending your time with us to share that, because I know how busy you are. So and hopefully we will see some of you on the 18th of October when we have our next session about MS Teams, and I put that in the chat. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much for everyone who has attended, and I hope you have a good afternoon.
Thank you all, and thanks, Elizabeth.